You're listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast. The OPP is brought to you by Natural Stacks, makers of 100% natural and open source supplements designed to help you live optimal. For more information on how to build optimal mental and physical performance into your life, go to naturalstacks.com.
Oh, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Optimal Performance Podcast. On today's episode, we have Dr. Shawn Baker, who you already know as the carnivore diet guy. He has a book coming out called The Carnivore Diet. He is really sort of the go-to guy when it comes to the carnivore approach to eating. If you don't know what the carnivore approach to eating is, it's literally only animal products. It's been popularized recently over the course of the last couple of years. This is actually a returning episode for Shawn Baker. He appeared on a previous episode back when Ryan Muncie was the host, and since then it has exploded. Joe Rogan is celebrating World Carnivore Month this month. Jordan Peterson has come out as a proponent of it to heal gut health issues, autoimmunity disease, as well as, some like emotional stuff, anxiety and depression that he's faced. And that's really what the stats say. The stats are saying that this really does help a lot of health issues for many, many, many people. In this episode, we cover the misinformation around the cattle industry and how we've been fed a line of bullcrap around emissions from cows. We dig into how the carnivore diet mimics because it is a food allergy elimination diet. We talk about the absorption. We talk about performance. We talk about nutrition for kids, focusing on a animal protein based diet. There are 200,000 people uploading their information and tracking their results from going on this diet. I myself am, by the time you hear this, I'll be 14 or so days into the carnivore diet, and it's pretty amazing. The most alarming thing is that I'm not pooping very much. I'm a 2-a-day kind of guy, and maybe this is TMI, but apparently my body is using all of the animal products that I'm eating, and it's fascinating. We also talk about some of the cultural pressures that we're experiencing now to go vegan and to go vegetarian. We talk about clean meat. We talk about a ton of misinformation that Shawn is just not having any of. He spent a long time researching the statistics that we're told about the degradation of the ozone and global warming because of cows. And the fact of the matter is that in this country there are fewer cows than there used to be, and it's really fascinating. It's packed full of science, and Shawn Baker is just a really dialed guy. I ask him a question and he just goes for it. Yeah, this is a little provocative, and I hope that you come at it with an open mind and an open heart, because I know that a lot of my friends think it's crazy to just eat meat, and it's a little crazy, but it seems to be working for hundreds of thousands of people. Also, want to mention that chiefsformen.com, which is owned by the same guys that own Natural Stacks. You can get 25% off your first online purchase at chiefsformen.com. And this face wash that I'm using is pretty great. I really like it. Also, we are switching up the format a little bit. We are kind of branching off. The Optimal Performance Podcast is spreading our wings a little bit. And what that means is dedicated social platforms, more integration into other products and other guests, and we're sort of given a little bit more freedoms. So you can always go to optimalperformance.com for show notes and follow-up. And follow me on Instagram. It's Coach Shawn McCormick, SEAN McCormick, MCCORMICK. And also go to ShawnMcCormick.com to follow me and what the heck I do. And also follow Optimal Performance on Instagram as well. And also, I'm going to offer this again. I've been talking about it for a while. If you want daily text messages to your phone with mind hacks, body hacks, spirit hacks, and life hacks, a little bit of inspiration first thing in the morning to get your day started right, just email me your phone number. No questions asked. I'm not going to call you in the middle of the night. I'm not going to send you cute emojis or gifs of cats playing pianos. I'm here to help people, and one great way to do that is to send you text messages. So, without further ado, enjoy this amazing podcast episode with Dr. Shawn Baker.
You're listening to the Optimal Performance Podcast, and I'm your host, Shawn McCormick. It's the OPP. I'm a performance coach, a wellness entrepreneur, a blogger, a speaker, a biohacker, and it's my privilege to bring to you the leading experts in the field of performance. So let's dig right in.
And we're here with Dr. Shawn Baker. You probably know him from the Carnivore Diet and his appearances on many podcasts, and you may even know him from his own podcast, Performance Outliers. And Dr. Shawn, welcome to the Optimal Performance Podcast.
Well, Shawn, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to get to chat with you.
Yeah. So, you know, it's World Carnivore Month. I myself am abiding by the carnivore approach, and I think like a lot of many other people, especially in the podcast universe, who are concerned with their performance and their diet and super curious. What is it? Is there anything that you are just super excited about right now that just like it's at the tip of your tongue? You live this, you talk about it. Is there anything that's new or it's developed in like this month or anything that's really recent that's got you excited?
You know, I think just a general trend towards more people being open enough to experiment with this stuff. I think, you know, we have this paradigm. You know, as someone who comes from a medical background, we've had the mantra for the last decade or so of evidence-based medicine. Unfortunately, we're finding out that much of the evidence that we have has really been sort of influenced unduly by some of the pharmaceutical companies. And so now I like to use the term results-based medicine, so to speak. And we're seeing a lot of results that matter to people, that people are, you know, truly reversing, you know, or coming off medications, reversing symptoms and signs of diseases, which are, you know, many of which previously we just don't have a solution for. So I think there's more and more people that are accepting that this is an option for people, and more people willing to try it. You know, this goes flat against the grain of what we're being sort of told in the sort of the prevailing winds are, you know, we need to all be eating a bunch of plants and make meat a condiment, and that's based on, you know, largely epidemiologic studies, which are really a poor tool for determining what you're supposed to eat as an individual. You know, these population-based studies, which really are so confounded with so many variables. And, you know, it's just nice to see, you know, World Carnivore Month, for one. You know, I started that last year, you know, just you know, the reason it's in January, just so you don't know, is because January is my birthday.
Nice.
I actually turned 52 tomorrow. And so I did that just because I was like, because they had made it Veganuary. The vegans did, and that kind of pissed me off a little bit. Well, I said, the hell, that's my birthday month. I'm going to make it World Carnivore Month. And so that's the story behind that. And so we're in our second year, and last year was very successful. Thousands of people did it and got, you know, just a whole bunch of people had just tremendous results. And so this year it's even bigger. We've got a lot of producers, you know, people that produce, you know, meat and products around that are now supporting that and are buying into the idea. And so I think, you know, we're getting a little bit of a pushback against the sort of what we're being told to eat. And I think we should do that. We should really rigorously determine what's the best thing for us individually, you know, to choose to eat.
I want to hit it head on because we've been told what to eat for such a long time. Does it stem from the food pyramid and subsidies and government funded cord crops and grain and stuff like that? Is that really where it kind of begins, the indoctrination of the fact that we were told to eat cereal every morning?
I mean, yeah. I mean, certainly that does play a role. I mean, we have, you know, for those who don't know, the American Dietetics Association was founded in 1917. One of the principal founders was a gal named Lena Cooper, who was a Seventh-day Adventist vegetarian. And so ever since the sort of nutrition science, at least in the Western world, has started, it's been vegetarian in its sort of belief system. And so the fact, coupled with that processed grains and some of these, you know, these foods are very profitable. They're extremely profitable. They're cheap calories. You know, there is a push to feed a lot of people a lot of just cheap calories, and it's not much nutrition. And that has really sort of driven a lot of policy and you know, not to be conspiratorial, but I mean, money is what drives a lot of things. And so I think it's basically just in the name of profit. People are, being told to eat this way or that way. And, this big push to take animal nutrition out of the human diet will only result in more processed food, more processed energy, more, energy rich but nutrient poor food. And that's going to end up being, just more of the same. More people sick, more people diseased, more people dependent upon supplements and drugs. And I think that is just absolutely, miserable for human existence. And so, yes, I mean, the subsidies, we subsidize the heck out of crops, corn and wheat and those things. And, they do feed a lot of people, and there's not as many people starving. But, particularly in the West, starvation is certainly not the problem. The problem is obesity and chronic disease, and those things are directly related to, what we're eating now, in my view.
Yeah. I think that's clear to see, taking it one step further, because I myself, put a lot of stock in conspiracy theories because a lot of them turn out to just be the truth. When you see actors, musicians, public people, let's just take Jay-Z and Beyonce, for example. Why in the hell why is that their thing? Have they been bought? Have they been brainwashed? Is it virtue signaling? Why in the hell would Beyonce and Jay-Z have a challenge for everybody this year to go vegan?
Well, I mean, I think probably to some degree they believe the message has been put out there. I mean, the message is very compelling. Don't eat the cute little animals, don't torture the animals. I mean, that's a very compelling argument that many people will make, and it resonates with a lot of people, and certainly with their, the people that listen to Beyonce and Jay-Z are going to be, younger folks that spend their money that way, and those are their fans, and that's their fan base, and so. Does Beyonce, I think she sells Pepsi or Coca-Cola as one of her sponsors at one point. And so, I mean, getting your nutritional advice from somebody like that, is arguably not that good of an idea. But the bottom line is celebrities have a big platform, they have a big megaphone. And so a lot of people are going to listen to them. Is there somebody that's perhaps, funneling some money their way for doing that? I don't know. It could be. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that what they're telling everybody is particularly helpful, but I do think it's trendy for sure. I mean, certainly veganism is trendy, particularly with younger folks. Most of the people that go vegan tend to be teenagers, young 20s, mostly female. It's just the trendy thing to do, and so it's just one of those things that. Whatever sells tickets or whatever makes money is what people will tend to do.
Yeah, I see the connection between, I myself am I'm about the oldest millennial out there. I was born in 1983, and so I'm just barely in that cohort group. And I would say that, to a large extent, millennials have more awareness of what's going on the planet. They're more interconnected. They grew up with instant access to technology. And these ideas, these memes around cute little animals being sacrificed for our nutrition, it tends to take on this sort of mob mentality. And it also aligns just perfectly with this virtue signaling, with this, this identity politics. Like, hey, look at me. I do yoga and I recycle and I don't eat animals, and immediately you've got one up on somebody who eats even omnivorously or isn't a vegan. And it's sad to say because there is a lot of sick people, and when your Instagram is so awesome, I'm sure you hear that a lot, but the demystifying, debunking science and posting pictures of people who used to be vegan who turn it around. The one sticks out to me, a guy in his mid-20s who was vegan for a long time, and he's emaciated and his eyes are sunken in and he's got bags under his eyes, and it's like the last photo he took before he switched to carnivore. And then like within weeks, like his beard starts to grow, like the color comes back to his face. Does that do you think that people really are turning the corner against this sort of disinformation campaign around diet?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly, a pushback for sure. I think that movement is growing. I think the one funny thing, as crazy as this carnivore diet is, I mean, it is very much in your face saying, look, we're doing 80 degrees opposite of what we're told. And guess what? We're all getting healthier. So therefore, it calls into question all of the nutritional advice that we've been given over the years. And I think that is a very powerful statement. I just don't think you can sort of argue with these people that say, look, I mean, I objectively, and these are objective measurements, my disease has gotten better. And so I think that calls into question. And there is no dearth of ex-vegans out there that did do it for a few years and then they get dramatically sick. And so I think, of course, the continued cry is, well, they just did it wrong, or they weren't committed enough, or they weren't, bought into the ideology hard enough, and that's why they quit. But I mean, truly, I mean, you just see people, and their teeth start falling out. I mean, it's like, at what point do we say this is madness? And, we accept the fact that human beings, being on the planet for 3 million years have, going back to Homo habilis, have always eaten meat. It's been part of what we've done since we've evolved, and that's why we evolved, and that's what we evolved to be. And it has been such an essential part of the human diet. There's never been an indigenous population that survived without it. And in fact, even if you look at the indigenous tribes today, I mean, they may be living in the tropics, surrounded by fruits and everything else you could possibly eat, but they still prioritize going out and hunting for their animals because they know that's what they need. I mean, it's just, the sort of thought that some of these people put out that were actually herbivorous animals, that were herbivores, is beyond crazy. And it just baffles me how intelligent people, or assumingly intelligent people, can even begin to think that. But it's just, I guess nothing ever surprises, the silliness that humans are willing to do. You see all the kind of crazy, the stupid human tricks, the Darwin Awards. I mean, human beings for a smart animal are actually pretty stupid sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think you're right on there. What's it like getting inundated with daily with people saying, "Hey, I switched and I'm this far and I feel amazing"? Does it just urge you to keep forward and to continue the course on this trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, just as I've gotten more popular on social media, it just exponentially grows, and I literally every single day I get, tens, if not, 20s or 30s of people telling me, this has absolutely improved my health. People that were suicidal are no longer suicidal. People that were alcoholics or drug addicts are no longer alcoholics or drug addicts. People who were morbidly obese are no longer morbidly obese. People with horrible crippling diseases like rheumatoid arthritis are no longer experiencing those things. And I get that literally every day. So certainly it encourages me to continue to do what I do. And even if it doesn't work for 100% of the people, for the percentage of people that it does is very encouraging. And, and I get a small amount of negativity from the people that are ethically opposed to it, primarily, vegans and stuff like that. But, yeah, I mean, it encourages me to keep going down this path. And I think we just need to learn more, and I think there's just a lot of stuff we don't know. Anybody that's, reasonably intelligent will understand that we know far less than we actually think we do. And there's much more we need to know and much more to learn. Yeah, but it definitely inspires me to keep going, keep doing what I'm doing. And, I don't foresee stopping anytime soon.
Given that, how important is it for? I guess it depends on the person, but how important is it? Do you think is tracking data? Especially for a podcast like this, which is aimed at performance and biohacking. Like how important is it in your mind for people to be tracking their sort of biomarkers during a carnivore diet?
I think. And I'm someone who doesn't really do that. I mean, it depends what you're tracking, I suppose. I mean, if you ask, me what my goal is, it's not to have a blood ketone reading of whatever, millimolar 80% of the time. I don't really care about that stuff. And so for me, with the things I track, and I do think, you have to have some way of determining what direction you're going in. I mean, I look at body composition, I look at athletic performance, and then as someone who's in their 50s, as you get older, you'll notice health issues, joint pains and stuff like that. Absence of those things, good digestion, those things I track, and I make sure that those are going in the right direction. I know if I do something, if I eat something, and it's not all about food, but I mean, for me, I know if I eat something that, for me, like for dairy, if I eat a lot of dairy, I'll notice some negative things that go with that. And so I do track those things. But when you get up into some of these things like, ketone levels, heart rate variability, blood glucose, all those things, and some of these labs, some people obsessively get labs, all of those things, we really don't know what they really mean in all situations. And so it can become a source of anxiety. And so I think it's more important, and I learned this in athletics, is to make the goal the goal. And if the goal is health, fitness, performance, track that stuff and don't track the minutia that may or may not be relevant to that. I know when I used to throw Highland Games, my goal was to throw this 56-pound weight, more than 35 feet with one arm. That was a goal. And I would, that was my stated goal, but I would get so involved in how much could I snatch? How high could I box jump? And I would focus on that more than I would what my actual goal was. And so that would always sidetrack me. And so I think you have to, there's nothing wrong with tracking, but you need to realize what metrics are truly, truly important to you and figure out a way to objectively assess those things. And sometimes it's hard because some of those things are really subjective. How do I track happiness? Do I count how many times I smile a day? Do I count how many times I laugh a day? These things become difficult, but truly when it's at the end of the day, what really matters to you? And I think those are the things you have to really say, what do I want to happen? And it's not going to be my blood ketone reading always being above 3.0 millimolar. I mean, I don't think most people could care less. I don't think people could care, what their testosterone level is. If your testosterone is 800 or 600 or 300 or 1,000, there are people that may care about that. But I mean, ultimately, what you really care about, what is my ability to put on muscle? What is my ability to maintain or to obtain an erection, or what's my sexual life like? Those things are things that are worth tracking or noting.
Yeah, I mean, having an objective awareness around how you feel. Are you walking around hungry all day? Do you have cravings? Those are some sort of soft trackables that I think a lot of people will identify with. And listening again to your episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with I think it was Chris Donahue, who's used to be 500 pounds, and it's hearing from a morbidly obese guy who's had these massive changes, and hear him say, like, I could not satiate my hunger. Like, my cravings did not stop all day, to now he's at a point where I eat the steak, and then after I'm done, it's like my taste buds and my cravings shut off. That is a trackable that makes sense to me. That how do you feel? Are you sleeping better? Do you look better? Are you physically in better condition? And in your case, what's your deadlift? How are the stats on your concept 2 rower? Like that. I'm with you, man. I have a ketone meter, but I'm more interested in how my body feels and how my emotions are more, and how my cognitive speed is more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think those things are, like I said, we often measure things that are easy to measure, and blood tests are easy to measure, but what are they actually truly telling us? And I think a lot of people they try to interpret too much into the significance of those things, and just realizing that those things can vary tremendously day to day. And that's why I don't get too excited. I mean, I had my coronary artery calcium scan done back in August after 2 years of 25 times the average daily American red meat intake, and surely red meat was going to cause something bad. And so when I got that done, I mean, it was perfectly clear. I mean, there was zero calcification. I had just a perfect score on that cardiac test. And so, it's not a perfect test. There are some things potentially that it might miss, but I mean, generally that's recognized as one of the better, if not the best tests to look at cardiovascular risk factors. And so, I mean, those are the things that are, like I said, what is reflective of what's going on in your body? over the long haul. And it's not what your LDL was on Tuesday. It's what your body composition is for the last 6 months. And I think those things are more reflective of your chronic state of health than these things that are just easily measurable, but are highly variable, very dynamic, and the import is really unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, as I go into day 9, eating in this way, and as I cook meat twice a day at home, and my wife rolls her eyes again, and I do my thing. I think that there's a value. I think that there's an important element of experimenting with different techniques and approaches to diet and exercise, and it just so happens it just seems like this is working for so many people. Are there folks? Is there a type of person? Is there a person that has certain ailments or something that maybe the carnivore diet would not work for?
I think there are people that have issues with digestion that make it more difficult. People that, have been on chronic acid suppressing drugs. Sometimes people that get older, they lose some capacity to digest meat. And that's just a consequence of, chronic exposure to probably poor diet and other lifestyle things that make it more of a challenge for sure. I mean, there's people that, a lot of older people, they lose all their damn teeth because sugar rots them out, and then they have a hard time chewing. And so, those things can make it more challenging. I think that, I think from the normal spectrum of human physiology, no, I don't think there's any people that, can't do the diet. Certainly there are places where it's cost prohibitive. There are places where it's culturally frowned upon. There are individual households where it's frowned upon. So those things can be challenging for people. And there's a lot of people that really get a lot of validation externally from other people, and they sometimes can't overcome those pressures. Back to your point about cooking, for me, I find it pretty easy. I mean, I throw a steak on a grill, and 15 minutes later, I got a nice steak, and the cleanup's nothing. And I use one dish, one fork, one knife, and I mean that's. I don't find it to be that challenging, as far as that. But I do think, we should value, cooking our food and getting our nourishment and procuring that and ingesting that rather than just, opening up another package and just slopping it down and eating some cheap refined crap, which is what we've then indoctrinated, acculturated to do through decades of just being used to doing that. We don't even think about food. We just, let's open up the cabinet, let's tear open a package, don't read, who knows what the ingredients are. Well, it really tastes good because it's been engineered to taste good, and it satisfies that, 3 seconds of gustatory delight, but nothing else. There's no nutrition beyond that. And so I do think that maybe the fact that it's a little bit of a pain makes you think more about what you're putting into your body.
That is an excellent point. And Shawn, not all of us get to live, I could live wherever I want. Not all of us do live in Southern California where you can just step out into our backyard and fire up the grill. Like, it's cold and rainy up here in Seattle, so I got to cook inside.
Yeah, I mean, it can smoke up the house if you're searing steaks on there. But I mean, and I've used this thing called an air fryer, which actually works pretty well. It's pretty convenient, so that might be a recommendation for you. Those work. It's not my favorite way to make steaks, but it does a pretty decent job, a pretty solid job, quite honestly, and it's very convenient.
Yeah, I've seen those rise in popularity. I think it's probably time to check it out. And to your point, you're right. Learning how to cook a steak, not well done, but just learning how to effectively cook a steak to the way that you like it. Being aware of the food that you're eating. Is an important thing, and you're right. We are so detached from, I don't know how you grew up eating, but the way that I grew up eating was vegetables came in a can, chicken came out of a freezer bag, and a potato came out of the backyard, and that was basically what I ate my entire childhood. Was chicken. It had skin on it and bone in breasts, but the vegetables came from a can, and it was pretty one dimensional, and it was pretty nutrient depleted, I think, to a large extent. I'm curious, how did you grow up eating? Is this approach much of a deviation from the way that you learned how to eat earlier in your life?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I grew up I was born in '67, so I grew up in the '70s, and, it was cereal and Frosted Flakes and Lucky Charms and Cocoa Pebbles and, Fruity Pebbles and Count Chocula for breakfast, and then probably some kind of bologna sandwich for lunch. And, unfortunately, my mom, I'm a big guy, but my mom was not much of a cook. She once told me she thought food was a waste of money. She'd rather spend it on clothes. And so that was, I mean, somebody who likes to eat, that wasn't really very particularly encouraging. But so not really any really, great foods over the years. I mean, I ate probably pretty average diet growing up. And then as I got older and started taking care of my own food, I tended to think I ate healthier. I ate, what largely what we're recommended to eat, with lots of grains and, fruits and vegetables, lots of fruits, and, lean dairy. I used to eat tons of yogurt, lean yogurt, I remember, but of course it was filled with sugar and, that sort of stuff, which I didn't really realize was an issue. And I ate that way until I was, in my mid 40s, and, and it served me okay. I mean, I never got sick, and I was able to perform as an athlete, and, I worked out really hard, and, had a belief that, it didn't matter what I ate as long as I trained hard enough, and, eat your dessert first because life's too short, and that sort of stuff. And, that worked until I was about 42, 43, and then it didn't work anymore. And then it started to catch up with me, and, and then I started to have to say, wait a minute, I just can't continue doing this. And here I am now, 10 years later, and, eating a bunch of meat like a crazy person.
I'm curious. I've got. I know you have a child, and I have two at home here too. And for as much as I know about diet and nutrition and exercise and running podcasts and coaching people and doing that thing, and also a lifetime athlete, like, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. And I think I still do. How I feed my kids. They don't get sugar in the morning for sure. If they don't get cereal, we do Saturday morning. They get cereal on Saturday mornings because it's, sort of fun. But obviously I get a little nervous about, like, I'm celebrating with sugary garbage. But I'm curious about, and I'm sure it's speculative because I'm sure there's not that many carnivore studies for children, but I'd love to hear your ideas on how to feed kids and how to give them proper nutrition, with all of about the carnivore diet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if we go back to like work guys like Weston A. Price, I mean, certainly when he studied, children of indigenous populations that were eating meat-based, super meat-heavy diets, they were robust and healthy and weren't suffering from any deficiencies. So I certainly think that can be a very good strategy. My own kids, I mean, I prioritize animal nutrition, whether it's meat, eggs, some dairy. They eat their fill of that. I load them up. I let them eat as much as they want, and often that's all they'll want to eat. But beyond that, then it just becomes other whole foods, whether it's fruits. They probably prefer fruits to vegetables, which is not surprising at all. I don't force them to eat, vegetables. I don't necessarily think they're anything special, quite honestly. I know that's controversial, but I don't really see that beyond. I think if you load them up on animal nutrition, then they're done. Then they're good. And then anything they want to eat beyond that, just for energy purposes, is fine. They will occasionally eat, a little bit of junky stuff, when they're out with their friends or they're at school. Unfortunately, going to school is kind of like it's unavoidable. There's so many teachers that have cupcake parties and pizza parties that stuff becomes, it's just really hard to get around that. But yeah, I mean, they prioritize, they eat, just lots and lots of animal nutrition, and the nice thing about it for me is, like, when I'm watching them on the weekend, I'll cook them up on maybe bacon and eggs and some steak for breakfast, maybe have some yogurt or something like that, and load those kids up. I'll tell them to eat till they're completely full, and then I don't hear from till the rest of the end of the day, till dinner time. Whereas a normal kid is like, it's kind of like we've gotten to this point where, like, when I was a kid, there was a concept that you're going to spoil your appetite for dinner, and so you didn't snack. Nowadays, it's like, oh my God, don't let your blood glucose get even slightly low. We got to keep you
Yeah.
continuously, fed with snacks. And so there's snacks everywhere. Snack time every hour you got to have a snack. And that has become the sort of the norm, which is, in my view, really a problematic. And it's leading to not only the obesity problems we have, but a lot of the chronic disease and probably some of the behavioral issues that go with that, because we're feeding these kids non-nutritious foods that are high in calories, but mostly just junk. And it's these vegetable oils, these seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, highly refined grain products. And sometimes they'll say organic on there, or sometimes they'll say with fruit juice added, or they'll have some natural claim, which is basically bogus. But that's what we're faced with. And, I find that, like I said, you load those kids up on it's unfortunate for me because I taught my little daughters. I've got two beautiful daughters that, I taught them about the different parts of the ribeye and about the rib cap and what's the best tasting peeps. And so whenever I'm sitting down to eat a ribeye, my daughters will come sliding up and they'll start asking for those specific cuts. So I have to sacrifice that for my kids. So, it's kind of funny, but no, I think I think kids should be eating a meat-heavy diet, animal source diet from the beginning. As soon as they're able to wean off of breast milk, that's where they should start, and they should continue that, as opposed to going on the grain-heavy, cereal, rice-based, sugar-based diet that so many of us get put on as kids.
Yeah, at my house, I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they eat their meat first. And this is not without any coaching. They've got protein. We don't do many grains. We probably do like white rice twice a week, but mostly it's protein and vegetables. And my kids always eat the meat first, and then they do the same thing. They look at my plate and they ask for pieces of my steak. And then, they obviously, kids don't like vegetables, so they don't eat it. And then, it's this battle between, should I make them eat it? Like, they don't want to eat it. They'd rather eat more of my steak than touch, the sauteed broccoli and butter. Obviously I cook with a ton of butter and have been eating ketogenically for a long time, a couple of years, at least 80-20. And, it's like, they're following their instincts a little bit. You can actually watch their little brains like, oh, this meat is good. I like it. Tastes good. It's satiating. And it's nice to hear that you're not forcing them to eat vegetables, because maybe I should adopt that at my house and just say, hey, if you don't want them, you don't have to eat them. Have 4 blueberries and call it good.
Yeah, if we look at the economics of eating, meat has always been prized, but it's expensive. It's a very we are very fortunate today that we have such a tremendous production system that so many people can enjoy it. But in the past, ruminant animals, particularly cows, were not utilized that much because, most people that had them, before, larger scale production, these were working animals. They plowed your fields, and you didn't eat the cow because, until he was 25 years old and ready to drop dead. And so, much of people being, raised, would be, eat a lot of grains. It's not much nutrition, but it'll keep you from starving. Eat a few pieces of meat here and there. And then vegetables. In fact, in some places, I think in Europe, up until, even a few hundred years ago, vegetables were considered kind of peasant food. And if you serve them in a setting where, like a aristocracy setting, it would be considered almost insulting to the guests that you serve them vegetables. And so they haven't always had this exalted place on the plate that they do now. And I think that is, I think there's a reason for that. And I think a lot of that is just because, you got to put filler in people. Just fill them up with something. Fill them up with fiber, fill them up with grains, fill them up with vegetables. It'll fill a hole, but it won't provide the nourishment that you could get out of a high-quality animal product. And I think the one thing about the carnivore diet is it is just probably the most nutritious diet out there. It's just purely concentrated, highly bioavailable, highly appropriate, when we talk about protein in particular, and fats, nutrition. And it fills all the bills, ultimately. And it's just so well tolerated, so well absorbed, so well digested that once people do it, it's like, wow, This is like nutrition, I know it's an overused cliche, but it's like nutrition on steroids, because you're just getting such a high quality amount of nutrition.
Yeah. Well, let's talk through that a little bit more, because I would like to hear some more. And I know that you've done 4 podcasts already today on this stuff, but I'd love to talk about the sort of physiological digestion and the use of the. And I forgot to ask the first question. Before I ask the next question, Shawn, the one question that I always start out with is, what did you eat today? What did you put into your body? It's 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. What have you eaten today?
Yeah, today was quite a good day. So it's my last day of being 51, so I celebrated with a 3.2 pound bone-in tomahawk ribeye, which I cooked on the grill, topped with a little salt and butter, and that was my breakfast, and it was damn delicious. I'll tell you that.
Nice, that sounds great.
And then I had a little bit of Greek yogurt right after that too. I forgot, and I should mention that too. But that's what I've eaten today. I probably later today I might eat some salmon, and maybe I might have a little. I've got some sirloin steak that I might have this afternoon, later this evening, depending on how hungry I am.
What about beverages? Are you a coffee guy?
I've never liked coffee, and so people ask me about coffee on a carnivore diet, and I always have to say, I always have to prep with the fact that I never liked coffee, so I never drank it. Just water so far today, and that's pretty much 99.9% of what I drink.
Yeah, I had boneless short ribs, and then I had a piece of New York steak from the night before, and lox too. Some wild caught smoked salmon, and coffee. Okay, so
sounds great.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm in a pretty good mood. When it comes to the usage, because I think this is fascinating, and I know that there are hundreds of thousands of people experiencing this very same thing right now, which is the bowel movements and how your bowel movements change. And I first talked with Dr. John Jaquish, who is the founder of OsteoStrong and the creator of the X3 bar, which is how I've been working out for the last little bit. And he's eating carnivore too, of course. And he was talking about his bowel movements, and he was saying like it may be shocking, but there are fewer of them and there is less material. And I was like, really? Why is that? And he's like, because I'm using all of it. Like my body, from the top of my head to the tips of my toes, is using just about every little piece of the steaks that I eat. And that's what I eat, is I eat steaks. He's doing OMAD, 1 meal a day, 2 or 3 steaks at a time, and it's changed dramatically. Can you and I'm experiencing the same thing, and it's a little unusual. Can you tell us a little bit about how our body uses the meat and how effective it is, as far as we're using all the different pieces of this steak that we eat?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a misconception, because people will say, well, it's constipating because you don't have bowel movements. And what he's experiencing is what's very common for most people. Although some people will notice something a little different. But for the most part, and we know this looking at patients that have had their colon removed and they have something called an ileostomy, so we can see what leaves the small intestine. And when you eat just meat, basically there's really nothing that gets out of the small intestine. It's almost all absorbed except for there's a small amount of liquid residue that gets out. And so basically you have really very little to eliminate, and then so if you contrast that to a higher fiber diet, when you have, you just have, 3 times as much, 4 times as much, 5 times as much material to get rid of, because you're wasting it all. One of the interesting things is we talk about food waste in this country. And, if we look at our landfills, something like 40% of that landfill from food comes from fruits and vegetables and baked goods. And then when we look in what goes in the toilet, the rest of it goes down the toilet in fiber that we can't digest. And so it's kind of funny, but it's true that meat is extremely well absorbed. I mean, our body is so efficiently designed. I mean, we're literally designed to digest and absorb meat extremely well, extremely efficiently. That's why we have a gastric acid of 1.5 or so, one of the most acid environments in all of the animal kingdom. It's on par with things like hyenas and vultures. Our stomach acid is more acidic than even many of the other carnivores. In fact, if we go back into Ice Age Europe and we look at some of the stable radioisotope data, it shows that human beings ate probably more meat than top-level carnivores like wolves. I mean, that's what's clear. And so we're well set up to that. If we, and particularly animal protein, they're again looking at these ileostomy studies. They've compared beef protein to soy protein, and when they compare how much protein actually makes it out of the small intestine, soy protein has a significantly increased amount because you can't digest soy as well. And there's things called protease inhibitors, which prevent, the breakdown of the proteins. And so what you see is, in contrast to people talking about meat rotting in your colon, if you want to talk about a protein source that makes it to the colon, it's going to be soy. It's going to be more so. And so anybody that talks about the fact that protein is acted upon by colonic bacteria and liberating materials like putrescine or cadaverine, it's going to be the soy proteins that do that even more so, because those are the protein sources that are not absorbed as well via the small intestine. But truly, yeah, what Dr. Jakish, I'm not sure if I'm saying that pronounced. I'm aware. I'm kind of aware of him. I've seen some of his stuff, but is absolutely correct. You are fully absorbing that nutrition, and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, is going to They're going to revise the method by which they assess food protein quality, and they're going to go from something called the protein digestibility index to the I'm trying to think what it's called now. It's called the indispensable amino acid digestibility. And they looked at, initially they used to look at the protein was left over in the stool, and the problem with that is that it overestimated that based on stuff that was happening with the microbiome, because some of the protein was being lost through the microbiome. And so that overestimated plant-based proteins and underestimated animal-based proteins. But when they look at the absorbability in the ileum, which is what they're looking at now, which doesn't deal with the microbiome losses, then they show that animal-based proteins are far, far superior than plant-based proteins as far as digestibility and absorbability. So it's kind of interesting. We'll see that come out in the coming years as they adopt this policy. That was a little bit in the weeds, yeah.
That was good. I was taking notes. That's why I got so quiet over here. No, that was perfect. The sensation is not of constipation. I don't have that at all. And I have, again, eating keto for years. I'm usually good for 2 movements a day, one right after the coffee and then one a little after breakfast. And what's happening now is it's not constipation, because I don't feel like I need to go, at all. I had one movement this morning, again after coffee, before breakfast, and I don't have a bloated feeling. I don't have a full stomach feeling like I need to go, and that's different. To go so little, and I know I'm only 9 days in. You're sitting over there 2 years in, thinking well, dude, relax. You're just getting started. But it's not. I don't have an urge to go. It really does feel like I'm all set. I don't need to go. That's one of the things a lot of people, because they're so used to a sort of a ritual, a morning ritual, or every day or twice a day. So they'll go and they'll sit on the toilet and nothing will come out. And they'll say, well, I must be constipated because nothing came out. Well, I mean, no, that's not what's going on. You're not constipated. You just don't have anything to get rid of because you've absorbed it all. And so that's something that, it's just a habit that people have to realize that, when you need to go, you'll go. But it may take, particularly when people first start the diet, some people, it takes them several days or a week or more before they even have enough material accumulated that they can have a bowel movement. It's not because they're backed up. It's just that there's just literally nothing to get rid of. It's fascinating. I mean, it is such a difference. Yeah, it's really amazing. Can we talk a little bit about I I heard Dr. Tara Patrick, I think it was on the Rogan podcast, talking about how everybody's interested in this now. Like you've made some serious waves. It's working. People are inspired. They're adopting the carnivore approach. It's working for them. They're getting rid of medications and their autoimmune problems and stuff like that. And now I imagine that there are lots and lots of people that are either studying it or looking at studying it. And one of the things that I think she mentioned was that why does this work? Well, one of the claims she made was that it's almost like an elimination diet. And I just recently had done an elimination diet to deal with a candida overgrowth in my gut that was leading to dermatitis on my face. And so the elimination diet was basically protein and vegetables, and now it's just protein. Can you talk a little bit about the correlation between how this mimics an elimination diet and why, I mean, without being too general, how it works and why it works?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, we need to study it formally to really answer some of these questions. But I mean, certainly it is an elimination diet when you look at it. I mean, and so first of all, you're getting rid of what I think is a lot of garbage out of the diet, which would be these toxic seed oils, a lot the sugary stuff, the refined grains. I think that's even sort of vegan proponents will say get rid of that stuff for your diet. So I think that happens first of all. I think that when we go back and just to use a historical or evolutionary example, I mean, human beings weren't running around at Whole Foods buying avocado toast and avocados and blueberries and all these. I mean, it just wasn't viable. It wasn't a real realistic option. And so when we think about what could humans have realistically eaten for the whatever you want to say, Homo sapiens 300,000 years and human beings 3 million years, I mean, it would have been largely these big grazing animals, which were ubiquitous. And, maybe they got some berries here and there. Maybe they got some, they dug up some tubers once in a while. And mind you, most of those tubers back then were extremely fibrous and not very starchy. So there would have been very low energy yield. So the incentive to do that would not be that high, particularly when you've got access to a wonderful fatty megafaunal animal, which would provide you really with all your nutrition needs. And so, yeah, it does act as an elimination diet, and I think it eliminates a lot of things we're probably not well designed to eat, and probably among those things might be grains. Some people would argue that the adoption, wide-scale adaptation of agriculture back 10, 12,000 years ago was, it was not done after randomized control trials, demonstrated that it was superior. It was done out of desperation because we ran out of all these megafaunal animals and our population started to grow, too big, and we had to support ourselves some way. But, as far as other things, there is evidence that leaky gut is which refers to intestinal permeability, is a mechanism by which many diseases occur, so particularly autoimmune diseases, arguably some of the mental health diseases, and many of the other ones, some of the joint pain maybe initiates in there. And so there is pretty good evidence, at least from a group in Hungary called the Paleo-Medicina group, that's demonstrating that a all meat-based diet does very good at restoring gut permeability, or normalizing it so you're not leaking anymore. That occurs. Certainly, like we talked about earlier, with the superior nutrition that animal nutrition provides. So I think it's a combination of those things that and the fact that it's a higher protein diet when it comes to weight loss. For a lot of people that are losing weight, we know that protein, even the people that are diehard calories in, calories out people will concede that you've got to normalize protein, you've got to match protein. But when you increase the protein, you can eat more and still lose weight. And I think that's pretty well demonstrated in the literature. And now the question about whether carbohydrates can do the same thing by eliminating carbohydrates, that certainly is debatable, but there is certainly evidence, and I'll certainly point to David Ludwig's most recent study done, I think, published in October or November this year, where they showed that people on a maintenance phase on a low carbohydrate diet, had something like a 200 to 400 calorie increase in their metabolic rate, depending on how insulin sensitive they were. So I think there's a lot of mechanisms potentially why it's happening. In animal studies, substances like carnitine have been shown to amply ramp up metabolic rate. Now, whether that happens in humans or not is still unknown. There's some people that believe it does. And so I think there's a whole host of reasons. I don't think it's just one thing. And I think over time, hopefully, as people are willing to study this, I know there are some people out there that are looking at studying this. And I do think we'll slowly get some studies on this over time, particularly as more and more people adopt it. And particularly as more and more people have good results, which seems to be the case. I mean, having done this for, a couple of years now, I mean, consistently the results are consistently good for the majority of the people, which I think is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is pretty powerful. I really hope that there are some widespread studies coming, because the proof is in the pudding when you have thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people who are reporting these massive changes in the way that they look, and the way that they feel, and the way that they live their life. There's the science is just shortly to come, I think, after that. One thing that I've noticed, just sort of cyber stalking you on Instagram like so many other people, is when people ask really intricate questions. And by the way, your Instagram live sessions are awesome. On the way to the gym to deadlift 7,000 pounds, but no, I'll take a minute and answer some questions. And when people ask questions like, hey, I'm eating pork rinds, it's done, they're chicharrones, no added salt, are these okay? And your answer invariably is, I wouldn't live on them. and there's so many intricate questions around people that want you to like give them every answer, and it seems like it's really common sense, and the way that you handle those questions is really fair and measured and polite. It's just like, no, you shouldn't live off of only pork rinds, but if you need a little crunch every here and now, like, do your thing. I really appreciate that. I don't know. I guess there's not a question there. That's just a comment.
Well, I mean, I think, the point about common sense, and like I said, this isn't, and I'll be the first one to know that I don't know all the answers. Hell, I don't think anyone does. I mean, I'm doing my best, the best I can, knowing what I do and trying to guide people in a reasonable sense. And I think it's something that, ultimately I tell people, you've got to assess objectively what it does to you. And, I don't think it's that hard to do. The elimination diet aspect of it kind of gets you a good baseline. It makes it easy. And so I tell most people, because I always get people asking me, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Is this carnivore? Is that not carnivore? And, I will say, well, technically, if it's not from an animal, it's not carnivore, but you need to assess what these foods do to you. And if you want to eat raspberries or avocado or supplement with MCT oil or drink heavy cream in your coffee, then just objectively assess that. I can't tell you the answer what's going to happen in your body. Only you can determine that. And you just got to, you've got to just sort of objectively assess that. And I think the only way to do that is to eliminate it and then add it back in. And I think that's just, I could just pin that as a pin, get a robot to say that for me every time one of those questions comes up. And it's true, I get a lot of those questions. But, it's kind of funny. I mean, at least it's not. When I first started this, I used to get questions every day about scurvy and vitamin C and how do you go to the bathroom. And I think that knowledge is getting out there for many people, where there's enough people that kind of, share that knowledge so that there's so many people that know the answer to this now that I don't have to continue to answer the question. But as a physician, I mean, I used to see the same problem every day, 20 times a day, whether it was a rotator cuff problem or a meniscus problem. And I mean, I'd have to tell the same answer to every person over and over again. So I'm conditioned to keep answering the same question over and over. I know it seems like it might be frustrating, but I just, sometimes, like some people will write on my Instagram wall or page or whatever it is, and they'll ask a question. And I know there's like 7,000 people that follow me that know the answer to that. And sometimes I'll rely on those guys to answer it for me, because I can't it just becomes overwhelming. I can't answer every single question. I try to answer as many as I can to people that directly message me. But, at some point it gets to where, I'd be doing nothing else. I wouldn't even have time to eat if I kept answering all the questions. And so hopefully as my book gets out, a lot of those questions will be answered for people, that hopefully will be, a resource that people can utilize and, get some of the knowledge out there and, hopefully, again, improve more people's health.
Yeah, tell us about the book. What's the timeline on that bad boy?
I think the publisher has it. I just sent the final, I hope the final copy to the publisher the other day, or the editor the other day, and so she'll have it for I don't know, a week or so, and maybe some little last minute changes or additions or subtractions. I'm not sure. And then hopefully they'll start the publishing process and the printing and doing that stuff. And I think that takes a couple months. So I think it's projected to come out around April. I think. I know it's available for pre-order. I know lots and lots of people have pre-ordered it. I know that companies like Barnes and Nobles have ordered a large amount. They expect it to sell pretty well. So that's encouraging for me. And it's going to be there's going to be quite a bit of information in there about some of the science, some of the, evolutionary perspective, historical perspective, some of the reasons, like we talked about, why it may impact disease the way it does, some of the success stories, how to implement it, some of the common issues that occur, how to deal with those, some tips and stuff like that, and a lot of visual guides. But again, it's designed for a broad audience that's maybe not familiar with the carnivore diet. So I had to write to those people because I think those are the people that are going to most benefit from that. People that have already done the diet for 6 months kind of got the deal. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated. I mean, I literally said I could have written the book in one page and said eat meat, drink water. Any questions? And I mean, that would have been the end of the book. But I mean, but then there's invariably a bunch of questions that come up. Even though, if I had to explain a diet to a lion or a zebra or a cow or a dog, I mean, I'd say, here, go eat this. And that would be it. They'd go do it and they'd be fine. But human beings, it seems like you got to, even the most simple things on earth become very complicated for people.
Do you have a title for the book, and where can people go find it, pre-order it?
It's called The Carnivore Diet by Shawn Baker MD. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles. If you go on my Instagram, Shawn, SHAWN, Baker, BAKER, 1967, it's in my bio. There's a link for that. So that's up there. I'll probably promote it a little bit more as it gets closer. I know the publisher's going to want me to do that because they want to make money on it. So
yeah,
I'll probably do some. I might, maybe I'll do a book tour with this, depending on what the demand's like. And I'm hoping that vegans will come out and protest it. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be good publicity.
Oh
so
my God.
You vegans out there listening,
Shawn, come to Seattle.
Please come out and protest it.
Come up to Seattle, and you want to find some vegans, man. Come to Seattle. Come to Seattle. I'll help you find a place. We'll do a book tour. Yeah. I mean, yeah. You're bound to have protesters if you come do a book stop in Seattle. I did have this question written down earlier, and I didn't mean to skip over it. And we're on such a good groove. I hate to kind of go back to something like this kind of toward the end of the podcast, but some of the things that I've seen you talk about regarding the cost of meat production on the planet, and some of the misconceptions that we have around methane gas and cow farts and stuff like that. That's obviously a major signpost for vegans and folks like that who want to make a case for not harming animals and not harming the planet. Can you give us a little bit of your thoughts and insights around the issue of because if everybody gets into this and this becomes wildly popular, there's going to be more of a demand on cattle raising. Can you talk a little bit about how you like to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I mean, first of all, just being alive as a human being, irrespective of your diet, is going to harm animals. I mean, just anything you have as a consumable good is causing death, destruction to habitat, to animals. And then when it goes to diet, it doesn't matter what you eat. You are directly contributing to the death of animals. And so this guilt-free, I do the least harm thing is really, not much. It's not making much difference. And arguably, if you decide to eat a fully carnivorous diet and you decide just to eat grass-finished, free-ranging animals, then your harm to the animal sentience amount is very minimal. It's much lower than somebody who is eating a plant-based or a vegan diet. Now, not everybody does that, and most people will eat beef that comes from the supermarket. So the argument is, well, the crops that are being raised to feed the animals also harm, these small animals. But at the end of the day, realistically, particularly if you choose beef. I mean, most people, their beef consumption would be about 1 cow a year. So that's one more animal you're killing, in addition to the hundreds of thousands of little small field mice and insects and whatever else gets killed in the grain process. So it's not much difference. But when we go to the environmental aspect, the war cry among these vegan activists and particularly the processed food fake meat companies, which are heavily invested to the tune of billions of dollars, which are propping up this message, is that not eating meat would be the best thing we could possibly do for the environment, which is absolutely a complete fabrication. The best thing you could do is just not have another child. You could, convert your home to solar. You could, stop taking plane trips. I mean, those things would have a bigger impact. But at the same time, we have to eat as human beings. I mean, that's not negotiable. You have to eat. And so of the things you can choose not to do, you don't have to take a transatlantic flight. Maybe you can do your business on a Skype call for one trip out of the year, and that would have the same amount of impact of going vegan would have. But more importantly, the statistics and the numbers that the vegan activists quote are just wrong. I mean, they're flat out wrong. I mean, there was a movie called Cowspiracy, which came out, I don't know, a decade ago or something like that, in which they claim that 51% of all greenhouse gases were emitted from animal agriculture. Well, that's clearly been proven to be patently false. That study has been dismissed by everybody that knows anything about it. The UN and the FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, did a study in 2016 where they claimed that now it's 18%. And that's still a pretty decent amount. But then that study had to be retracted even further because they failed to realize that they did a life cycle assessment on animals, but they didn't do a life cycle assessment on any other industry or transportation. So they weren't even comparing apple to apples. And so when they revised those claims, they found that the life cycle impact of animal agriculture is still 14%, which is not nothing. I mean, it's still a decent amount of environmental greenhouse gases. The direct emissions, by the way, if we just count direct emissions, are only about 5%. But when we look at that 14%, and we have to compare where you live, what impact you have locally. And so 80% of the greenhouse gases produced by animal agriculture in the entire world are produced in developing and third world countries. And that's just because they have an incredibly inefficient way of producing their animals. They're very inefficient. It takes them, in Europe and in the U.S., it takes a year or two to produce a cow for slaughter for beef. In places like Africa, it might take 20 years to produce that same amount. So it's 20 years more environmental impact. And so by going vegan, you'd have to tell these people in Sudan or Ethiopia, you guys need to go vegan because you guys are the main offenders. And what's going to happen if those guys go vegan? They're just going to starve to death because they're already malnourished in a lot of those developing countries. And so, but if we look at like the actual data, you can go to EPA.gov. You can look it up on the U.S. government website and look up the emissions, by sector, greenhouse gas emissions by sector. And if we look at in the United States, all of agriculture, that's plant, that's animal, that's everything together, is only 9%. Animal agriculture only represents about 4%. And then if we scale that down to cattle only produce about 1.9% of the U.S. greenhouse gases. Transportation produces about 26%. Industry is about 25%. Energy production is about 30%. So animal agriculture, not eating a steak in Chicago, has minimal impact in the United States on what our greenhouse gas footprint would be. And in fact, there's been calculations done that if every single person in the United States were to go vegan, all of us, all 330 million of us, and at the same time, all of the animals were to vanish completely and instantaneously from the environment, the difference in worldwide greenhouse gas production would only be 0.3%. So it's almost nothing, it's like it has no impact whatsoever. Again, if you want to go vegan, go vegan in the Sudan, then you might have a bigger impact. But I mean, that's, that no one's going to tell people that. Most people in the world that eat a plant-based diet are doing so out of bare necessity. It's because they're starving, and that's the only thing they have an option for. That is the reality of it. This Western affluent country of choosing to go vegan is just merely, it's a bunch of virtue signaling, basically, because you're not really making much difference. The other argument is, well, you're killing the Brazilian rainforest, right? So there is some truth to that. So planting soybean crops is killing Brazilian rainforests. But again, not eating a steak in the United States has no impact on that. There's almost none of our beef comes from Brazil. It's something like 0.5% of our beef is imported from Brazil. So next to none of that. So it's really not going to have any impact. But more importantly, why are those soybeans being raised? It's not specifically so they can feed them to the cattle. Now, they do eat a lot of them. But what happens is we grow the soybeans for our consumption in the form of soybean oil. And then what's left over, the shoots, the stems, the leaves, the ground up soy meal after the oil's been extracted is then fed to these cows. But the reason that they're being planted in the first place is primarily for human consumption. But independently, and Brazil's got a lot of issues with corruption and government stuff, and so that is again, it's a region-specific problem. So going vegan in the Netherlands, going vegan in Europe, in England, in the United States, and Canada is not going to have any impact on that stuff. And so this is the whole point of, you're somehow saving the world. Well, you're not. You're not doing anything. All you're doing is basically compromising your own nutrition, and that's a real issue here.
That is such a clear explanation of the situation, and the fact that you're able to cite, I'm sure that the fact that you're sharing those sorts of percentages, and that it's that little of a difference is astounding, and it only reinforces the importance of debunking these spoon-fed myths around food and around pollution and gas emissions from, because I grew up with the understanding that pollution and methane emissions from cows were the reason why there's a hole in the ozone, and to hear it laid out like that from you. If you want to be vegan and make a difference, go move to Sudan. That's a meme right there, man. You gotta, if you haven't posted that anywhere, that's a tweet for sure.
Yeah, I put that on Instagram a while ago. But I mean, the other thing is when we talk about methane emissions, and this is something that people don't understand. People talk about, well, methane is 20 times more potent of a greenhouse gas, as far as its impact when we talk about, climate change. And clearly there are people that don't feel that man is really impacting the climate. It's more solar flares and volcanic activity and so on and so forth. And that's a different debate. But for the, but the majority of people do feel that man is impacting the environment. Certainly we're polluting. We shouldn't be doing that. But methane, if we look at methane emissions from cattle for the last 50 years or so, it's been stable. It hasn't changed at all. We still have, in the United States, we have less cattle now than we had in 1970. Most people don't realize that. We've dropped our cattle population by about 30% since about 1975. So we make the same amount of meat because we're more efficient at it, but we've dropped the number of cattle. The methane emissions from cattle has been pretty much stagnant. It has not changed in the last 50 years. What has happened is methane emissions have gone up, but what's happening is we're seeing increased leakage around natural gas sources. And so mining the natural gases, the leaks from the delivering that stuff, there's much more leakage than we thought. And so that's where the real methane drivers. A lot of people don't understand that termites produce as much methane as cows do, termites worldwide, because they digest wood, and the same bacteria that cows utilize in their rumen that produce methane when they digest, or act upon those materials, are leached into the air. If we have the wetlands, marshes, the ocean, those are all huge sources of methane. And so what do? Do we get rid of the oceans? Do we get rid of the wetlands? Do we, rice farming? Rice farming emits a ton of methane as well. And so people don't talk about that because, they think cows are cute and cuddly, we shouldn't eat them. But more importantly, methane is probably not the main issue. Methane's half-life in the atmosphere is 12 years, which you think, well, that's kind of long, 12 years. But that's nothing compared to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, when it goes into the atmosphere, stays around for thousands of years. And so when we compare the difference, carbon dioxide is a much more potent greenhouse gas just because of its half-life. And almost all of that carbon dioxide is coming through the burning of fossil fuels. And so that is really the real driver of climate change, if you believe there's a man-made source of that. And some people don't believe that, but if you believe that, it's fossil fuel burning, it's oil production, it's gasolines, it's your cars. And so that is by and far, and if you look at the International Panel on Climate Change, they'll clearly show you that is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas change that we have, and that has nothing to do with cattle or land usage. We had 150 years ago, we had 60 million buffalo roaming the plains of the United States, which is almost as many cows as we have now, and nothing changed back. There was no difference back then. And if we go back further in history, when we had the megafaunal animals, before the megafaunal extinction, we had orders of magnitude more animals, big ruminant animals. Interesting fact, about 100,000 years ago, if we look at all the animals on Earth and we weigh them and we say this is what an elephant weighs and this is what a cat weighs and this is what a mouse weighs, and we were to take one representative animal and weigh them all up and say what is the average of all terrestrial animals on the Earth today, it would be about 20 pounds, right? So if we take up all the animals, add them up, say what's the average weight, it was 20 pounds. If we were to go back 100,000 years ago, the average weight of an animal would be 1,100 pounds. So our Earth was teeming with megafaunal animals. These huge mammoths were everywhere. These huge short-faced bears and, woolly rhinoceroses and glyptodons and all these things were everywhere. And they were all producing methane. They were all grazing animals. And the climate we were in an ice age back then. And so, it's laughable to think that, the fact that we have 1 billion cows now and that's driving all of our global climate change. It's completely laughable. But there's people that are bought into that, and it's not. It's based on ideology. It's based on a religious belief that we should not harm animals or sentient beings, and we should not eat them. And it's really become a religion, and it's very pervasive. And the people that are out there with that message are very persuasive, but they're putting out basically propaganda, and they're doing it 24/7, and they're propped up by these processed food companies that stand to make a killing. When you stop eating steak, you're going to eat processed food. You're not going to eat beans. You're going to eat some processed food, sugary, oil-rich bar, because you're going to need the energy. Because you think about what you get from a steak from an energy and a nutrition standpoint, you can't produce it in beans and kale. Particularly the satisfaction or the energy portion. So you're going to get it through sugar. Sugar is the most energy dense, most economical product to produce out there for crops. So if you want energy and calories, grow sugar. That's the most productive thing you can do.
Dude, fascinating. Oh my gosh. Just breaking it all the way down right there, Shawn. What do you think is going to happen when these giant meat producers, and they already have, allocated budget to these clean meat initiatives? Do you have any vision about how that's gonna pan out?
Well, first of all, I think there's meat alternatives, which are the Beyond Meat things, the Impossible Burger, which is just a bunch of plant proteins mixed with some sort of vegetable oil, with a bunch of supplements thrown in there, and that to me is just absolute garbage nutrition. I don't think I don't foresee that being a long-term viable thing, although there's people that really believe in that, and there's a lot of money being poured in that. I know like a possible food, so this is an interesting thing. I just talked about this with Diana Rogers on our podcast today earlier, and so a guy named Patrick Brown, who is the CEO of Impossible Foods, right? So he is a vegan activist. He just stated his goal, and he feels the number one priority on Earth is to end animal agriculture. That is his stated goal for the mission of his company by the year 2035. He founded a scientific journal called PLOS, P-L-O-S, right? And this is an open access journal. And, recently there was a article that got a lot of waves by a guy named Marco Springman, who is another vegan activist scientist who published a study saying we need to tax meat for various reasons, for health reasons, to save a lot of money, save a lot of lives. And he published it in this journal that was founded by another vegan. And that's made a lot of media. It's just kind of like driving this. Oh, there's a scientific study out there that says we need to tax meat. And so that's being pushed forward by these vegans guys they're in positions to do that. The media is just lapping it up because their sponsors are processed food companies who love the fact that we want to get rid of meat. And they base that on, Marco Springman based his study based on the World Health Organization's proclamation in 2015 that red meat is a class 2 carcinogen and processed meats are a class 1 carcinogen. One of the problems with that panel that made that conclusion, which was called the IARC, the International Association for Research on Cancer, which is based out of Lyon, France, is when they met, and Dr. David Clearfield was on that panel, and he voted against that decision. And what he said was, while he was on that committee, about a third of the people on that committee were vegan or vegetarian. So they had a vested biased interest, and they refused to declare that. They didn't declare that, and he asked that they declare that, and they said, no, we're not going to declare that. They looked at a bunch of studies, and they just routinely threw out all the studies that did not support their conclusion. They did not hear all the evidence. There were a lot of dissenters with that, but they still went with that, and they said, well, we're going to do that because we think it's ethical and the right thing to do for the environment, and therefore we're going to make this political statement that meat is a carcinogen, based on extremely, extremely weak evidence, most of which was epidemiology showing a minimal effect at any below any significant amount that we would ever consider acceptable based on something called the Bradford-Hill criteria. So that came out, and then Marco Springman uses that, a panel decision put out by a bunch of vegetarians then causes a vegan to write an article that we should tax meat, which is then published in a study that was published in a journal that was founded by a guy who's the chairman of the Beyond or the Impossible Foods fake meat company. So you see where this is going. We've got this, this agenda-driven thing that's trying to push it there, and so it's just, beyond, it's you just watch it and you're seeing this, and people are just buying it hook, line, and sinker, and it just feels so good. The message is, don't eat those cute, cuddly cows and pigs. Rather eat our fake burgers, our fake slop burgers. When we talk about the lab-grown meats, right, the clean meats, and by the way, clean meat is no longer allowed to be used. That term is no longer acceptable because the meat industry fought that and said, no, by saying yours is clean meat, that implies that ours is somehow not clean.
Interesting.
So that is no longer so clean meat is no longer will no longer be allowed to be published, at least by the people that produce that stuff. But as it stands right now, the current technology, and they're projecting that it'll save the environment, that is based on just complete guesses and complete estimates on their part. They have no working bioreactors to prove this in. It's just all speculation on their part. But the way they do it now is, they have to grow these cells. And these cells have to eat something, right? You just can't make protein out of nothing. So where do you get your protein from? Well, guess what? You get them from hugely giant monocrop fields of soybeans and peas and wheat and corn. So you're going to have to grow all the monocrops to build that protein. It's not a free thing. So all the protein you get from the plants, you got to put into these bioreactors. What do they grow what do they grow them in? So they have to keep them sterile because there's no, these little meat cellular structures don't have an immune system, so they have to keep it sterile. So they have to continuously bathe them in antibiotics and other, pesticides and other chemicals to prevent antibiotics from growing in there. So that stuff is bathed in that stuff. So people complain about antibiotics being administered to cows. Well, this stuff is like 1,000 times worse. Additionally, the only thing that makes those cells being able to live is being bathed in something called bovine fetal serum. And so what they have to do is they have to kill a pregnant cow, take the unborn fetus, stick a big needle in its heart without anesthesia, suck out the blood, and spin it down for serum, and then use that to grow the cells. And they have to continuously do that. As long as those cells are growing, they have to continuously supply with new supply of dead pregnant cows. So, it's just a nightmare scenario, and who knows if that stuff is going to be healthy for us or not. One of the things is to make those cells live forever, because that's what they want to do. They don't want to have to keep harvesting cells from cows, because once they get the one they like and it produces what, they're going to want to continue to grow it over and over again. That's the same thing we do with cancer cells. We've got breast cancer cells that have been alive since the 1960s because they continue just to replicate. Does that have an impact on us eating that stuff? So you're basically eating a bunch of tumor cells because they've become immortal. And is that a problem? Eating a burger that's 100% tumor cell, would that cause anybody some concern? That's bathed in dead cow, dead fetus, cow fetus serum. So that's the technology as it stands right now. But they're going to point it out as it's energy efficient, it's going to save the environment, blah blah blah. And more importantly, if they scale it and they can make it profitable, That's the only thing that's going to matter. How much money can they make off it? Can they do it more cheaply than they can raise a cow? And that's going to be the bottom line. And it's going to be, it's going to be pushed on you. They're going to lobby for that. And, the government's probably going to, I don't know. Hopefully not, but we'll see what happens. So I'm not ready to buy off on the lab meat. I just don't think it's a good idea personally.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, when you describe it like that, it doesn't. It's a lot less. It's a lot less palatable than the way that I've heard it explained before. Of course, yeah.
Well, and they've got to grow it on a scaffold as well. The meat just doesn't grow; they've got to give it a shape. And so one of the things they're using as a potential is plastic. So they're putting a little plastic scaffold which the meat will grow in. And do you eat the plastic then, or does the plastic come out? I mean, I don't even know how they're going to make the steaks. They might be able to make a blob of meat, but it's going to be, and my understanding is vegans won't eat the stuff, at least the ethical ones, because of the reasons we talked about with the cows being killed anyway. So who's going to eat that stuff? I sure as hell would rather have a nice real steak than some meat blob.
Yeah, it is meat blob. I think that they're a really long ways away. I had Paul Shapiro, who wrote Clean Meat, on the podcast because I was just so fascinated by it, and he explained that they're a really long way away from being able to create a steak. It's ground beef, or it's ground clean meat. Well, I can't say it anymore. So it's made in a beer brewing system. He talked about a beef chip, which was like a beef jerky little thing. Fascinating, man. Well, so much to think about. I have really enjoyed your content, Shawn, and I really appreciate your approach. And the way that you show up in the world is honest and forthright and backed by knowledge, and the results are speaking for themselves. There's so many people having such amazing results just from taking the carnivore approach and simplifying the way that they're eating. And I'm 9 days in and I feel really good. I've got a busy day today. I've got lots of stuff to do. I'm going to go work out here after this because I've been sitting for a little bit. But I like to end the podcast with asking each of my guests to complete the sentence. So if you would, everyone would benefit from knowing.
Everyone would benefit from knowing that, the power to change your health is very much within your hands.
Dr. Shawn Baker, thanks for joining us today on the Optimal Performance Podcast.
Hey, it's been my pleasure, Shawn. Thank you. Let me know when this goes out and I will try to publicize it as well.